WCLN 1170 Radio and Star Communications Channel 16 proudly present the We Should Know Show, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative. Now, here's your host, J.W. Simmons, as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, folks. We Should Know is on the air. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking education today, and we're talking with a gentleman that has been involved in education for quite some time. He comes to us from Greensboro, North Carolina, and I think one of the things I want to try to do a little quick introduction here on this guy, and when you see him now on camera, or if you're listening to us on radio, you'll know who he is. But the reality is that he comes from an environment that is a bit different than Sampson County, but yet Dr. Jamie King decided to come here and take on this opportunity and huge responsibility of looking after the huge number of schools we have here on a dynamic rural landscape. Dr. King, thank you for being here, taking time to talk to us. And let's start out this morning talking about back to school. I've kind of labeled a lot of these conversations as it relates to education. There's this back to school time piece that's so critical, and that parents are often looking, do I have what I need for my child? Is this kid in elementary school, middle school, high school? Is there certain things that they have to have? Is he or she going to be out of place if they don't have a tablet or something of that nature? Just kind of give us your vision of what the parents need to know, what teachers need to know, and it as equally as well what the students need to know.
Yeah. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it. Love to talk about education and back to school. It's our most exciting time of the school year. What I would say to students and parents and staff, really everybody, is that, start of school begins before school starts, right? It's that week, the month leading up to, today's August 1st, right? So we're in the month that school begins. So it's really preparing, right? It's parents talking to your children, right? Sitting down at the dinner table saying, so school starts in 2 weeks. What are you excited about? What are you nervous about, right? Having those conversations with students, right? One, so that as a parent, right? Because I have 3 children of my own that are in school, and sometimes we're disconnected, right, from what happens on a daily basis. So just having the conversation with your children, I think, is really important. So then you can then talk to the school, right? So then on open house night, you can go into those teachers' classrooms and say, hey, Jamie's really worried. This is his first time in middle school. He's starting in 6th grade. He's nervous. Right. So then that teacher knows, hey, when Jamie walks into the classroom, I need to give Jamie a little more attention. Right. And so I believe that it takes all of us, it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just the parents. It's not just the teachers. Right. It's not just administrators. Every person who connects with that child, bus driver, cafeteria worker, custodian, we all have to work together to make sure kids are safe, that they're given what they need to. And so I would just encourage parents to not wait until the weekend before school starts to have conversations about school, but start them now, right? Start bedtimes and routines the week before school starts, so that first week of school isn't such a shock to a student, right? That they've been on some type of routine and schedule at home, and they have a routine and schedule in school. They're used to that, right? That's a commonplace. So, anything that parents and communities can do to help talk to kids and prepare them really helps. But I would say, we have open house nights coming up, where we open up our schools and invite families, parents, students in to meet teachers, walk their schedules, right? Learn about the buildings. Too many times people show up and just walk the schedule and say, hey, I'm Jamie, I'm going to be in your 3rd block class, and then walk out, right? I would encourage parents to have a conversation, right? It may not be at open house, but schedule another time. That teacher cares about your child and will spend 7.5, 8, 9 hours a day with your child. Make a connection there, right? The closer the connection with family and teacher, the closer connection that teacher is going to have with that student, and really be able to help educate them and give them what they need this school year.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm feeling here. I'm hearing you say you need to develop a relationship, not only with the teacher, but maybe the principal, and let them kind of understand you and your world as a parent, because it's fixing to merge.
Yes.
And it can be a smooth merger, or it can get very radical. And the more information they got, the better off they are.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, you know, as a principal, former principal and former teacher, what I don't know, I can't fix. Right. And so if I know that Jamie comes to school every day and he's riding the bus with a kid that bothers him and bullies him every day, I can't fix that unless you tell us. Right. And so there's got to be this communication, right? And I would actually say conversation more than communication, right? There has to be conversations between home and school, right? And it's got to be a two-way street. It can't just be the teacher calling to say what's going on with the student. It also has to be a parent, right? A grandmother, an aunt, an uncle, someone reaching out to the school to say what's happening with that student when they get home, right? What's causing them anxiety? What's working really well, right? My favorite phone calls and emails with families and parents is, hey, I just wanted to let you know that Jamie came home from school today and wouldn't stop talking about what he did in his second block biology class, right? Those are the things that light our fire, right? Those are the things that we can say, man, let's grab onto that and figure out what happened, what went really well, how do we extend that, right? But too many times all we hear are the negatives, right? This kid had a bad day. This is something negative that happened. But there's also great days in education, and there's great days where kids come home and they've learned something and the light bulb moment hits, right? I would encourage families to reach back out to schools and tell them that, right? That we've got to hear all things that are happening so that we know what's best to do and what we need to cut out because it's not working for kids.
So there's really, and I think you're making this pretty clear, is there's really nothing off the chart. You want to know anything. Sometimes the micro details is just as important as the macro details of what's happening, both in the life of that child in the hopefully plus area. But if not, if there's an issue, if you can address that up front, you may solve a bigger problem down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, being in schools is my 27th year in education, right? So I've been around for a while. I've had experiences where a student gets in trouble at school one day and you call home and you find out, oh, well, their dog is sick, right? Or their grandmother's in the hospital or something, or they didn't have electricity that night. Their power went out and the alarm clocks weren't working. I mean, there's a list of reasons, right? Kids can they can just wake up and have a bad day, just like us as adults have bad days, right? But when the school knows what's happened, they can relate to that, right? They can put things in place to make sure that kid has support. So that student has someone they can talk to, right? Someone that they can let go of their drama, right? Let go of their baggage and talk to a school counselor, talk to a trusted adult, right? And so if we can approach those on the front end rather than wait for a student to do something that may cause them to get in trouble because of the myriad of reasons, then we've taken that off the table, right? Now that student's in class, that student and that teacher have a great relationship. They're working well, right? And so the more information we know as educators, the better we can plan, prepare, and then roll out lessons to students.
One of the things, words you used in just explaining there was you talked about bullying. That's kind of a keyword issue. It's been on the map now for a number of years. Are we in a better state of mind to deal with bullying now than we were 3, 4, 5 years ago? With your experience, as you just pointed out, not only in the classroom, but in management positions for 27 years, is that something obviously has always been there? I mean, I can remember way back in decades of my life that, on school buses, it's always been there, but it's gotten to a level at one time where it was very hypersensitive. Where are we at in that world, and what do you see on your radar as it relates to that one word?
Yeah, I think we're still there. I think that, unfortunately, our students never get to disconnect from school. They don't get to disconnect from the bully. They don't get to disconnect, though, also from their boyfriend or girlfriend, right, or their parents. When we all went to school, there were different things, right? You had home life, you had school life, you had your community life, your church life. And for the most part, they never really crossed, right? They were very separate entities. The people crossed, but the things didn't. And so I think now with cell phones, with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the social media outlets out there, kids never have a disconnect. And so what happens at school continues on the school bus. It continues when they get off the school bus and walk into their house, right? When they're playing Fortnite or they're playing online games, it's still following them, right? And so our kids never have a disconnect where they can be themselves. It's constant communication, constant things coming at them. And so I think it's just really important that we have conversations, that as parents, you're talking to children, right? That every child has a trusted adult that they can talk to and share what's happening. Bullying has happened forever, I would argue, and probably will continue. But what we have to make sure is that kids understand how to deal with that, right? How to say to a student, hey, that's enough, right? Don't talk to me that. Don't call me that name. Because there also has to be a safe place where students can have conversations with students to say those things. And it can't always be the adults who are taking the lead on that.
Does activities, for example, bands, sports activities that students are involved in, does that help kind of deal some with that bullying aspect? And do you encourage parents and students to get involved in, I'll call it, extracurricular activities? Is that something that is becoming more and more important, to have the physicality of a relationship rather than the technology of a relationship?
Yeah, I think what we know from, research on young people and students is that, most students join gangs or join outside groups because they don't have a connection with anybody, right? And so the point is build a connection, right? Whether it's band, drama, sports, find something that interests you as a student, right? Find something that engages you. Because once you're plugged in and connected into a school environment, you're going to stay connected, right? You're going to have more opportunities for people to check on you, more opportunities for teachers to tutor you, more opportunities, right, to get deeper into the curriculum and knowledge of what's happening in the school building. So I think no matter what the organization, what the group, all kids need to be involved in something outside of just the school.
We're going to take a quick break here and come back, and I want to give you an opportunity to just kind of speak to the teachers out there, because Sampson County Schools got a lot of folks that are teachers. You got a lot of staff as well. We're talking thousands of students that you look after each and every day, and even when we're on break, you're thinking about those students, I'm sure. But just kind of address any comments you might have for teachers and parents and that relationship. I really like the fact that not only are you supporting, but you're 100% behind building that relationship. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment. We're talking about education, particularly education around the school district called Sampson County Schools. Dr. Jamie King is with us. We'll be back in one moment.
Computer viruses, malware, and ransomware are out there. They're dangerous, and they can steal your identity and damage your equipment. Star Communications is now offering Protect IQ. The service adds an extra layer of protection to every device connected to your network, working quietly in the background. Star can help you protect yourself from the inside out with Protect IQ. Call Star today and take advantage of this free service when you sign up for whole home Wi-Fi with Star Communications.
How can your friend save you money? It's easy. Refer a relative, coworker, neighbor, or friend to Star Communications. Friend signs up for high-speed internet service. Friend's new account is confirmed. Friend gives your name to our service representative as the one who referred them to Star. You receive a $30 internet credit. It's just that simple. And even better, receive a $30 internet credit for every referral that results in a new confirmed account. High-speed internet from Star Communications. Refer a friend today.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know's on there. J.W. Simmons here, your host. We're talking with Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools. Dr. King, thank you for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you on. It's always an open conversation. You're kind of willing to go anywhere, and I enjoy following you in this conversation. We've talked quite a bit in this first part of the show today about a number of issues related to students and relationships. I want to just give you an opportunity to speak to principals and teachers that I know you try to see on a regular basis, but if there's something they need to know as we're trying to get back into school, or maybe they're into the first or second week of school, any key bullets you can give them that would, let's call it kind of incentive thinking or something.
Yeah. So our teachers have a huge job. I tell people all the time, teaching is one of the best professions. I still believe that I'm a teacher at heart. I'm still an educator. I still love to go into classrooms and nudge the teacher to the side sometimes and teach a little bit, because that's why we all did this. And that, kids are the forefront of what we do. And so I think that too many times our teachers are on the front lines and they feel like they're by themselves, right? And they feel like the community, and not just in Sampson, but across the country, right? Our educators feel attacked and they feel like they can't get up and do what they want to do and what their passion is, and that's teaching kids. And so I would say to our teachers, stand up with that same conviction. Teach your classes like every class has the superintendent's children in it. It's one of the things that I say when I hire people is people will say, well, is this person good? And I say, I'd want them to be my child's teacher, or I'd want them to be my child's principal. And that's how I have to go off of. And that's kind of the measuring stick that I use. Is that person good enough for my child? Because if it's not, they're not good enough for anybody's child. And I'll say that to our teachers, they are the hardest working people in our district. They show up day in and day out and give and give and give and get very little back. And so as a community, as a district, we are always trying to find ways to support them, to help them, to engage them. One of the things this year, we're really looking at our instructional and academic coaches, who are there to provide supports to teachers, who are there to go in and provide feedback, right? Education is one of the few professions, I would argue, that we don't really look at ourselves and give good feedback, right? You go into a medical clinic, right? And there's doctors who observe other doctors all day long. You go into a courtroom and there's other lawyers sitting there watching other lawyers present. In education, you walk into a classroom and there's one teacher teaching 20 to 30 students, and there's not another teacher who's watching and learning. And so this year, we really want to harness the power of our teachers and have them really learn from one another, right? And go and watch another teacher, steal ideas, learn from them, see what works and what doesn't work. Education is still mostly the same thing it's been since we started, right? It's still the same education system from the 1800s. You have one teacher in one classroom, 20 to 30 students, and that's it. And we've got to look at how do we change that, because our students are different, right? Sampson County Schools is different. North Carolina is different. But we've got to figure out the best way to educate students. And that's really supporting our teachers, giving our teachers the knowledge they need, the skills they need to really go in and move every student, because every student's different. And what works for one student doesn't work for the other 27 students in the class. And so teachers' jobs are really difficult, trying to find the way to reach and teach every single student, and my wife laughs at me all the time. She's like, you run a school district with 8,000 kids, but our 3 kids run you, right? Because it's different, because every kid is different. Every kid is unique. And so teachers really have to take that and figure out how best to educate, how best to teach, how best to support all of those students when all of them are different, come with different needs, come with different baggage, right? And what a teacher can't do is say, well, don't worry about that today, JW. I'm just going to teach you, because JW is going to hold on to that, right? Students don't know how to let go of things, right? That part of their brain hasn't developed yet. And so as teachers, they really have to figure out, how do I help JW learn this material, but also deal with whatever else may be happening, right? Or deal with the bad grade he got in the class before that, right? Or the girlfriend that wrote a note, right? There's so many things that students deal with that then our teachers have to deal with to help students. So our teachers deserve so many accolades, so much. And I think that this year we're really trying to focus and help our teachers so that they can present better lessons to students so that we can increase our outcomes for kids.
How are you doing, and how do you feel like the district is doing in the employability of teachers? Do we have adequate teachers? Are we looking at futuristically having a less number of teachers that's willing to go into the profession of teaching and to maintain the certifications? Sometimes I read articles and they go, we're down like 10, 20, 30%, and they're looking to bring back teachers that have since retired to teach. What do you see in Sampson County?
The teaching field is changing, right, drastically. Most of the people that we hire are not coming from college and university programs, right? That pool of candidates is beginning to dry up. I would say not even beginning, it is drying up, right? We just don't have students who are graduating high school and going to college to be a teacher, right? And I would argue we've done that, right? We as a society, right? When we continuously attack schools, we continuously attack teachers. We say that teachers are trying to indoctrinate kids, right? Teachers are trying to teach kids. That's what they're trying to do, right? Are there one or two teachers that may be trying to indoctrinate a student somewhere? Yes. Is that what's happening in the whole in Sampson County schools? No, right? Our teachers want the best for kids, but they feel attacked like we've talked about earlier. And so I think that what we have to do is figure out ways to support teachers, make them feel like Sampson County Schools is home and that they can flourish here. You know, we're involved in several programs, several grants that is really looking at redefining our teacher education system, right? And so one of those is looking at kind of rethinking our teacher pipeline. And so right now, let's just say, for example, we hire 3 third grade teachers at a school. One of those third grade teachers is an experienced, you know, they're 27 years. They've been in this role for a while. You have that second teacher who's been here 10 years, and then you have maybe a new teacher. Well, we expect all 3 of those teachers to do the exact same thing. That's crazy. No other profession would ask a 27-year veteran and a brand new teacher to do the exact same thing. But in education, that's what we do, right? So we've had lots of conversations and working with outside entities about how do we change that? How do we give that 27-year teacher a completely different responsibility list than the new teacher, right? So the 27-year teacher now is in charge of planning. They're in charge of parental contacts. The new teacher is going to professional development on instructional strategies and classroom management and things like that. The middle, you know, the teacher who's been there, the middle of the road, maybe they're trying to vertically plan, right? Look at what are we doing in grades below and above. And so you change how these 3 people interact and what their responsibilities are. All 3 are teachers. When the bell rings, they all go into their classrooms and they all teach. But outside of that bell, outside of the classroom, all 3 of them have very different responsibilities. And so we're looking at how do you harness that, right? How do you change the education workforce? You know, as I talked about earlier, you know, we're really looking at increasing our academic coaches so that teachers are getting feedback on a daily basis, that there's someone in their classroom saying, hey, did you think about asking this question, right? Did you go deeper? This is a great spot where you could have pulled in the standard that's going to come up next week, right? Because teachers know what they know. And so they have to have help, just like every profession needs assistance, with someone watching them, someone giving them that feedback. And if we want to change outcomes for kids, that starts in the classroom, right? It starts with better instruction, better teaching and learning for our students.
That's amazing commentary, because I was picking up so many things I wanted to follow up on. And one of them is very clear that the traditional instructor methodology planning, and you've got the lesson plan, and you go in the classroom, you follow the course mission statement, you follow the objectives, and you walk out and you say, well, I've met those objectives. You basically told us that you're going to have to push that aside and become more personal and more direct in that classroom and have some flexibility, is what I hear you say. And I'm wondering if the teachers, and I'm hoping they're listening or watching, but if they get that, that should be somewhat of a breath of fresh air, because there's not only that, I don't think we can expect it anymore as we look at technology and what happened in 2019 with COVID. It kind of changed the trajectory of how a teacher teaches.
It did. And I think, you know, since COVID, I think we've forgotten many of those tools, right? As educators, I mean, we all went virtual and online over the course of a weekend, right? I mean, governor closed schools, I think on a Thursday, right? It may have been a Friday, I don't remember. And then by that next week, most school districts had some type of online digital platforms up and running. The issue is when we came back to school, we kind of forgot about some of those tools, some of those great teaching strategies, right? I talk about that technology can be a conduit to help us get small group interactions, right? Allow more individualistic opportunities for students to complete work. Too many times, though, teachers have forgotten some of those tools because they're now dealing with, you know, students that are tardy, students that are absent, right? Students that need to get up and leave the classroom in the middle of a class, you know, discipline problems, students not doing their homework, right? So what we had in a virtual environment, some of those problems you didn't have there, you now have back in the face-to-face environment. And so because of that, I think many of our teachers have gone back to what they've done in the past. And we've got to figure out ways to integrate some of those technology pieces in. Now, what it should never be is a kid walking into a classroom, opening up a laptop and sitting on a laptop for 45 minutes or 50 minutes and not having any interaction, right? That's the whole opposite end of the spectrum. But what we got to find is ways to help teachers know when to integrate, right? When to use There's this big analogy in education that I hate, but it talks about the toolbox, right? And teachers have the toolbox, and you got to know when the tools. I argue that our teachers have massive toolboxes. They just don't know when to use what tool, right? And too many times we have teachers who are trying to use a Phillips head screwdriver when they should be using a wrench. But we didn't educate them well enough on what's the purpose of the screwdriver and what's the purpose of the wrench, and when do you use higher order questions, and when do you use an advanced organizer, right? And when do you use small group learning versus whole group, didactic teaching? Those are what we got to help teachers figure out, because they have the passion. They want to do well. They want kids to learn. We just got to help them know when to pick what tool and when that tool's the right tool.
I like your analogy of the toolbox, because I could take that and we can really run with that. When we come back from break, I want to kind of dig into some of the other areas here. I'd love to spend a couple of shows just talking about the instructional methodology part, because I think that's huge. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. We're going to a quick break. We're going to come back, continue to talk about education from various perspectives with the Superintendent of Sampson County Schools, Dr. Jamie King. Stay tuned. Call a friend.
Providing fewer commutes, more backyard offices, and crystal clear meetings. Providing less, you froze up, and more presence in your presentations. Providing a better internet experience. Providing possible.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. Security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
Welcome to Cork and Brew Roseboro, where you can enjoy your favorite coffee, fraps, smoothies, bakery items, sandwiches, and select beer and wines while reconnecting with friends and family. Sit down and enjoy the experience. Come on by and give us a try.
The average American household has 17 devices connected to the internet. With more and more devices able to get online, you may need to increase your internet speed. Call Star Communications today and let us help you select the package that's right for you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. J.W. Simmons here. The name of the show is We Should Know. We're coming to you from Star Communications TV, Channel 16, simulcast on WCLN Radio. The 14th year of this show airing. I want to mention that multiple times. When we come into August, it's always our anniversary month. So it's the 14th year of We Should Know. Thank you for continuing to give us your feedback and bring us information from you that helps us build these shows each and every week. We're talking about education to Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools. Wow, these first two parts of the show have just gone rapidly fast. Your commentary to educators, I'd love to spend at least a couple hours just talking about that. But I want to move on and talk about some other things that to kind of get your feedback on and help us understand. One of the things strikes me, and as we talked off camera a bit, it's not just in Sampson County, but the demographics of public schools has changed. And I'm going to use this word, and it might not be the best word to use for this, but it appears to me from just looking at the data over just the past 5 years or decade, or at least 5 years, we could say the demographics has changed radically, and that radical change has almost created an effort on their part to look at the word majority and minority and try to figure out, has those words flipped?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think Sampson County, just like Sampson County Schools, right? I mean, we're a microcosm of our community. Mm-hmm. Our demographics have shifted drastically. And so I shared with, administrators last year, the 3-year trends in our socioeconomic status in Sampson County Schools. And I think, one of our schools that had moved the smallest was a 34% increase in their students that have free and reduced lunch. Right. And so you think about that in 3 years, a third, that's the smallest school that we have, a third of their students have fallen into low socioeconomic status. that means we got to change how we teach, right? We got to change how our schools run. Mm-hmm. It's a different clientele of students. Mm-hmm. And so you look at that's our smaller school. I think our largest school had a 76% increase, right? Again, in 3 years, 2/3 of their students have fallen into low, socioeconomic status. And we have to change then how we teach. Those students come with a different set of needs, right? A different set of wants and desires. And we have to make sure that we're educating them in the right way. And so when I talk about changing education, it's not changing to be flashy. It's not changing because it's what we want to do. It's what we have to do, right? Our community is changing. At Sampson County, we're about a third in demographics. So we have about a third Caucasian, a third African American, a third Hispanic. That's a massive shift in what our demographics were, 3, 4, 5 years ago in Sampson County schools. And so again, to our teachers, to our educators, we have to look differently. We have to think differently. We can't walk in with the same lesson plans we've used for the last 15 years because the kids are different. And if the kids are different, then we should then reflect those differences in our teaching techniques and our teaching practices. We're opening back up our, face-to-face alternative learning school this year. So that students, I argue that students are better than their worst day, just like you and I are better than our worst day. And as adults, I'm going to have a bad day and I'm going to do things wrong, but I shouldn't be judged in my entirety because of one day. And I believe the same with students, right? We shouldn't judge them based on one event. So we're opening back our face-to-face alternative learning program because we realized that we had to shift, right? That those students also need to be in school. They need a caring adult. They need someone who's pouring into them to make them better, right? And to help them. And so all of those things are because we have such a high shifting demographic that we really have to rethink, how does it work here? What works? What doesn't work? What are the things that we need? I met with our migrant education team a few weeks ago to talk about how are they integrated into the school, right? What are their feelings that they get when they walk into a classroom or into a school building, right? And then vice versa. What do principals and teachers think of our migrant ed program? And how do we get them all working together instead of where sometimes it feels like we're fighting entities for the same kids, right? And we're all here to better kids. Let's align ourselves so that we're doing that in the right way.
It's interesting, and I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into this. It seems like I hear you saying you're trying to structure the school so we can understand that it's not a race issue. It's kind of the human race issue in the sense that we have to adjust in how we approach it so they can better understand it from the background experiences they have had. Because right now, whether folks agree or not, you just pointed out, which is a reality, the demographic has changed. And it's changed radically as to your point, in 3 years. But it's not just Sampson County. It's multiple counties. I mean, the data statewide, I think, expresses that same thing.
It does. I think that, we really have to, when we go back to the teacher level, right, we have to make sure that teachers understand what that different demographic means. And so a great example, we talked about this at our leadership retreat with all of our principals this week, is, think of a word problem that says, Jamie King shot a birdie. Different cultures, that means a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
Right? And so as a teacher, if you don't think about that ahead of time, if you don't think about, hey, I'm going to write this word problem and I'm going to use golf as the example and use the word birdie and par and eagle, some students are going to have no idea what you're talking about, right? And so when we talk about changing education, that's also part of it, is educating teachers about how to use the right vocabulary words, how to use the right examples. Because if you use that as the example, there may be 3 students in your classroom that have no idea what golf is or what you're talking about. Well, those 3 students aren't going to learn, right? It has nothing to do with the curriculum and the standard that you're trying to teach, but the relationships that you pulled into that are now preventing some students from learning. And it's great. We need to talk about real life, right? We can't talk about if you have 2 apples and 3 oranges, right? That's not the real world. Let's talk real world life examples, right? And so not that teachers shouldn't do that, but teachers also have to understand that you have lots of different diversity in your classroom. And so if you're using the golf example, then you also got to preload that with, hey, here's some vocabulary words you might not know. But teachers aren't trained that way, right? That's not how teachers came through an education system. They're looking at standards and objectives. We got to help them to think a little more holistically about making sure that what they pull into those lessons and assignments are relatable and that kids can understand that.
To help folks
kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here, oftentimes you have students, I suspect, that come into the classroom and their parents do not speak fluent English. They often have trouble understanding the dialect issue. So we're really talking about language indoctrination here to bring people to some sense of commonality of understanding through understanding the language. Because often, let's face it, as folks that, traditional English or that language, we have times that we obviously don't get along. Now, if you add to that, the parents may not understand what that teacher is relaying to that student. And as you so vividly pointed out, it could become a huge antagonistic issue if we don't address it. Would that be a correct observation?
That's exactly correct. Too many times as teachers and educators, we forget about being a parent. Right. And so I tell people all the time, I got to put different hats on all the time. I'm constantly switching what role. But the hat I always put on is a parent first. Right. And I always go into a situation trying to think, if I was that child's parent, right, if I was the parent of that child, if I was, whatever the situation, how would I want this handled? And I think too many times as teachers, we forget that. Right. As educators, we forget that. As principals, we forget that. That put the parent hat on for a minute, right? Think through, if I was this child's parent, what communication would I want? What would I want to know? And I think just because it's busy, it's crazy, right? A teacher has 30 kids in a classroom. If they're a high school teacher, they might have 3 of those classes a day. So, you're looking at 90 kids that you're teaching a day. Some of our specials teachers are teaching 100 to 200 kids a day, right? Because they're teaching kids every 45 minutes. They're getting a different group throughout a school. So when you're having that many connections, right, sometimes we forget about not just doing our job, but also about being a person, right, and being a parent and thinking through, this is a child, this is a student, they're not a number, what's going to work for this student today. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough people, right? We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough school counselors. We don't have enough mental health therapists, right, to give us everything we need. So then the people who are working are so overworked and burdened that I think that's where some of that rub comes from, of not having the time and the resources to really be able to do all that they want to do with those students.
I want to try to squeeze this in. So where this is, time just gets important, like with everything. But I want to touch on some of the governance issues with public schools. And one of the things that I know that you're on top of is the whole funding thing with state, local funds. How do we access that? What is the reality of increasing the student ratio? Is how much is that student? Oftentimes I'll look at folks and I'll say, look at education and look at that child and answer the question, what's that child worth? Mm-hmm. Because it's balance between what the state's going to fund versus what the supplement of the county is. Help us understand better how you deal with that and things that folks need to understand, that we're really putting a mark on something that is our future. So if we are, and I get a little too passionate about education, I guess, but if we are, we need to value that at a higher rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell people, you will pay for my students one way or the other, right? And we can either educate them the right way, or you're going to have to incarcerate them because we didn't educate them, right? And most studies will show you a poorly educated society will increase your incarceration rates, right? It will increase the burden on welfare, right? It will increase the tax, or it will decrease the taxable income. And so we've got to do education right. And I argue to everybody that if we just did this right and we do it the right way, mm-hmm. everything else will happen like it's supposed to, right? Our communities will flourish. We will grow, right? We will be prosperous, right? Students will have great outcomes. And when my outcomes aren't that students just leave Sampson, right? I don't think great outcomes are every student being rich, right? But I think that every student being rich in what they do and having choices and being able to make a choice, and a student being able to say, no, I want to stay in Sampson County. That's awesome, right? Like, I don't want students to leave us. I want them to stay here, but I want them to have the choice. And I think too many times in educating kids, we don't leave them with choices. And if my choice is only to stay here, that's not a choice. And so make sure we're educating students holistically.
We'll take a break. We're going to come back for the next part of the show. But there's so much here. As we go to break, I want to remind folks that we're not going to cover everything we want to cover, but we're going to cover some key issues. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
If you run a business, you need sales. To get sales, you need customers. To get customers, you need exposure. Let our team of experts craft and produce the perfect video ad to reach your intended audience while making the most of your advertising dollars. Call 1-800-706-6538 or visit starcom.net to contact our Star Communications production team and get your business moving to the next level.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming up on the last segment of the show today. It's called We Should Know. My name is J.W. Simmons. It's my pleasure to be with you each and every week, at least for the past 14 years. August is our anniversary celebration month, and we have with us Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools today, talking about the things that are built around not only today, but our future, and that's the education process. And you cover that here in the district in Sampson County. We've talked about Dr. King, we talked about a number of very vital issues that both I think you and I could agree on. We could talk about lesson plans. We could do an entire semester on just any one of these topics. But I wanted to kind of stay with the governance issue here for a moment. You laid out a path that was very interesting last segment, talking about we basically deal with our students now because we're dealing with their future. If we don't get this right, then our future is going to get a little bit sideways. I want to kind of shoot over to that governance piece as well in the funding area. One of the things that's happened here in the county, and a lot of folks are familiar with, is our school facilities and keeping those facilities not only current, but adequate to house our students and safe to house our students. You worked, and I'll use my words here, diligently with foresight to try to move forward with a building in the Hopton School District, which didn't go through on the grant side. A lot of folks said, well, we tried, it's over with. What's your response?
It's over with for that year.
Right.
Applications open today, August 1st. For the new grant cycle, and so we will continue to apply for that again for Hopton High School. Our Board of Education has already said that they would like for us to continue that, so we'll be contacting our county commissioners once the application came live this morning. So once we get that completed, we'll be going to them. I think that it's a way to build us a new school that we need drastically. I mean, I think our newest schools are over 20 years old. Yeah. That's not new anymore. No. Right. Most schools are built for a 60 to 80 year life term. Right. So we've got to start thinking about what do we have 18 schools in Sampson County. All 18 schools being rebuilt is going to cost a lot of money. So how do we do that in the right way? Right. How do we also be good stewards of taxpayers' money? Right. It's really difficult when we say, oh, we want to build a school for $74 million. Right. And people are like, oh, why does it cost so much? Well, let's explain that to you. Let's break down these costs. Right. But building an educational building a school is not cheap. Right. And so those grants allow us to make the most of our local dollars, but also bring in some federal dollars by those grants that then our local taxpayers aren't having to fit the whole bill, right? And so, for example, with Hopton, we were asking for about $4 million match from county commissioners for a $67 million building. It's hard to say no to that, right? Yeah. And I understand that everybody has their hand out and everybody wants a piece. Yeah. But when you're looking at the future of kids, right, and the future of our communities, that's what we have to pay attention to, not just a price tag. We are paying to make sure that kids have adequate classrooms, right? That teachers have adequate facilities, that they can truly teach, the knowledge and skills. We have new science curriculum standards this year that I worry, can all of our high schools teach the new biology standards? Because do they have the resources? Do they have what they need in the classroom? But we can't fix that. I can bring you resources. I can get you the professional development, but I can't change your room. And so, right, those are things that we've had conversations of, is how does the environment change what the teacher does and what the teacher teaches. And that's just really important. So we'll continue to look at those. I mean, we continue to look at grants constantly. I think last year, Ms. Newton shared with us and the board that I think we had, close to $4 million in grants that we had received from various different funding sources, right? And that's $4 million that, one, our local economy isn't having to give, but it's also things that are very specific, right? And so each of those grants are written with a specific purpose. One of those is $1 million to help our instructional programs in our high schools, right, over the next 3 years, and, to add instructional coaches there. So there's things like that we look at beyond just our local dollars to make sure that we're looking at the big picture and really focusing in on our needs here in Sampson.
It's so important when I hear you talk about this, because I think one of the things that I reflect on is that the efforts you've made with that particular facility is something that, if you look back at years, every year the cost of doing that facility exponentially goes up. So time elevates the cost of doing it. So in a few years, we'll be looking at $100 million for the same facility if we could go ahead and do it now. So I think what I hear you saying also is parents need to get very passionate and share that with not only you, but others in leadership roles that we're here and that we expect something to happen for what you pointed out a while ago, our future.
Definitely. And I don't want it to feel like it's a battle. I know that our county commissioners support education and they want the best, right? And they also have a finite amount of dollars that they can handle. So I understand all of that. And our county commissioners have been great to work with, but I think that parents, county commissioners listen to who talks to them. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's the loudest voice. Mm-hmm. And that's just an unfortunate part of politics. And so if these are things that our community wants, then county commissioners have to know that, just like I have to know that that's something that we want, right? And so I think, having those conversations, but also not pointing fingers, right? That there's also, unless someone just shows up with a blank check, there's a finite resources, and we all have to pull from those resources. And so understanding that, some things got to get cut if we're going to add something else, and understanding that big picture, I think, is important for people. But definitely to advocate, right, to contact county commissioners, contact our office, right, if there's things that aren't happening, so that we know, because again, we can't fix what we don't know about.
Circling back, trying to do a little last few minutes here that we've got. When we look at the school system, again, to kind of reiterate the importance of teachers and the adequacy of teachers, are we fully employed now with teacher positions, or do we have vacancies in the county that you're still needing people that you'd like to recruit for, or that you'd like to say to the population out there, we need teachers in this area, this area, this area?
We would love some Hispanic teachers, right? That's a thing that all of us in the state are struggling with right now. In our central office, we have one Hispanic staff member, right? We have 8,000 students. Again, about a third of those are Hispanic. If a Hispanic student can't see a Hispanic leader in our district, then what are we doing, right? If students can't see someone that looks like them in our leadership
that they can relate to,
right? What's happening. And so we always need Hispanic teachers. Any Hispanic employees we really need. I would say that, right, what we need to do is make sure that all of our Hispanic employees aren't custodians and cafeteria workers. Right? Like there's got to be that students see themselves in higher organizations and higher departments. And so I think that's really important. We always need exceptional children teacher. So EC teachers that are really kind of working one-on-one with individual students, right, who may have some learning disabilities. That's really important. Every year we have, when we get to August, we have about 20 vacancies, and that's what we kind of have right now. So we're kind of in the same ballpark that we're generally in every year about this time. But we always need good teachers. And so what I tell people is you got to learn, you got to love kids.
Yep.
And you got to be willing to learn. And if you can do those two things, we can teach you what you need to know. We can teach you the pedagogy. We can teach you the instructional strategies. We can teach you how to relate to kids and how to do a bell ringer, how to do a closing activity and a ticket out the door, right? We can teach you, the hierarchy of needs. We can give you all those things. So I always talk about teaching as a will and a skill.
Yeah.
And if you have the will, I can teach you the skill.
Yep.
But if you have the skill, I can't teach you the will.
And you got to have the passion to do it.
And you got to have, that's the thing about education. You got to love it. And you got to want to show up every day, because kids are hard.
Yeah.
Right. and they're different, and every day is different for them, but you put your arm around them, you love them, you teach them, and typically good things happen from that.
Absolutely.
And so we just need to continue to push and encourage people to join us in the education world.
Just a few couple of minutes here. I just want to touch on school calendar. Any particular things you want to mention back to school here relates to the calendar for the coming 24-25 school year?
Yep. So we start school a week after Clinton City starts. So it'll be a little confusing. Clinton City starts, and then we start the next week, and then most of the other schools in the state kind of start the third week. So I think that we put together a school calendar that is most reflective of students' needs. And teachers' needs, and that's really, finishing, having balanced semesters so that your first semester and second semester are balanced, following as closely as possible the community college calendar so that students can take classes at the community college and it's on the same calendar as our school classes. And then I think, 3, that we get done with that first semester before winter break. So that when students are, home for those 2 or 3 weeks, they're not having to come right back and take a test that is a high stakes test. So those are the 3 things that we really put as our priorities when we build our calendar, and go from there.
So I think we're talking the 18th or 19th of August.
That is correct. Yep.
Something
August
like
18th.
That. So the other very quick thing here now is that, and I don't want to really open the door on this, but I got to mention it. Technology and learning is part of something we talked about a while ago. Artificial intelligence is now taking the screen. It's like it's all of a sudden the stage. Is there concerns you have with that? Obviously, that thing is out of the bag. I mean, we're not going to put that back. Just give us your 30-second rendition here on artificial intelligence. That's not fair to even ask.
No, it's great. I love artificial intelligence. I think that it can completely change how we teach and how kids learn. I think that teachers are very worried that it's going to take their job. And what I would say is that there's nothing that a computer can do for a kid, right, that's better than what a person can do for a student. Mm-hmm. And so because it's not just about the teaching and learning, it's about the relationships, it's about that connection. But I think there are lots of tools out there that if teachers harness, AI can really help them and can help them do a better job, right? And so it's about, to me, substitution model, right? So what are things that AI can substitute, right, that we use now? And so lesson planning is a great one, right? Why teachers are still writing lesson plans? Unbeknownst to me, because you have AI, right? Just type your standard in there and you can bring up lots of different things. We purchase instructional tools for teachers to use. So, all of those things with AI is there for really to help them do a better job.
I want to thank you for being with us today. We just come up short on time every time, but it's one of those subjects that could go on and on. So again, thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. Dr. Jamie King, and education will always be at the top of the list on this show and for you. I look forward to seeing you again right here on We Should Know. And as always, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.